Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing: a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. But I'm still teaching Zettelkasten. As long as you guys are getting a lot out of it, I will continue teaching it. So what I'm doing today is I'm covering the start of a new book, uh, Made You Look by Carmen Simone. And the subtitle is How to Use Brain Science to Attract Attention and Persuade Others. And I'm going to be demonstrating pre-reading a book. What do you do if you're following Mortimer Adler's method before you dive into analytical reading to determine whether you actually want to read at the analytical level, what's in the book for you, determining its structure, and whether it will be valuable for you. And we're going to do that, and we're going to see the order in which items go on to the front of the bib card. So it does have a tie into the Zettelkasten in that regard. And sometimes when you're only looking at a completed bib card, it's hard to know, well, what order did you do things in? And so this is an attempt to fill in that blank. So I will see you over at the down-facing camera in just a moment here. Okay, so here's the book, Made You Look, How to Use Brain Science to Attract Attention and Persuade Others by Carmen Simone, PhD, who's author of Impossible to Ignore. And so I'm going to begin, as always, with making a bib card and making an author card. I do not have a card for Carmen Simone, so the first card that I would naturally make would be the author card. The author card is going to provide her name, PhD, and then just a list of all the titles for her. And this one, Carmen Simone, CS, Made You Look, MYL. And that's all that card needs to say. Now, for my people box, I do an extra step that has turned out to be very valuable for me time and again, and that's that I make a first name card. I don't have one for Carmen yet, so I created one for Carmen and shows Carmen Simone, PhD. If I already had two other Carmens, they would all be on the same card. You'll be surprised how many times that comes in very, very handy. My bib card includes the title, the subtitle, the author, the copyright information, and the publisher. So this is a new book from 2024. At this point in time, the next thing that I would add to my bib card would be why I'm reading this book. And at this moment, I'm going to be answering that question as part of my next step in reading. And my next step in reading is to follow the advice of Mortimer Adler on how to read a book. And I'm going to be taking this book and I'm going to review its structure. And then I'm going to do a cursory reading of the book to determine what if anything in this book seems like it's going to be worth reading. So let's take a quick look inside ourselves, and then I'll pause and come back when I have my reason for reading. But let's take a quick look together. It's a pretty decent sized book, and it's hefty. It's printed on glossy paper, and it's got some pretty amazing photographs in it. I've kind of thumbed through it very lightly already. Um, it's supposed to be for business communication. Now, I was a little bit disappointed in that regard because business communication isn't exactly my thing, but I am very excited about using brain science to attract attention, because that's really something that as an author is going to want to do, is very early in a story attract attention. So one of the things that I'm going to be looking for as I go through this book is, does it seem like it's going to have anything that has to do um, with reading or something that a fiction writer could use, or is the whole thing going to be specifically visual elements, in which case I might have a very abbreviated reason for reading. So I will return after I have done that phase. Okay, I'm back. And as you might be able to tell from the sticky notes attached to this book, I've had a chance to do a pretty good cursory reading of it. I've inspected the structure. I've identified some elements that are quite interesting to me. And I've picked up on a few areas, a few notes that I might be interested in focusing on. I did a cursory reading of the first chapter. I really very lightly skimmed the middle chapters after noting the structure, which was quite interesting. And then, as is often my habit, I carefully read the concluding chapter. And the concluding chapter to me was quite disappointing. Earlier in the book, I picked up on a number of things that were interesting to me, but the final conclusion just seems to be primarily pablum. It's sort of like your content gets better than when you get better, so don't be in a big rush, don't multitask, get plenty of sleep, take some rest breaks. This last chapter could simply be any seek solitude and silence. It could really be any, have a balanced approach to life and take good care of yourself. It really had almost no relevance to the topic of the book as a whole. I probably should have read the second to the last chapter, but that wasn't my intention. What I did notice in terms of structure, I noticed some interesting things. One thing I noticed, and I picked up on it in chapter 1 as well, it's got an excellent collection of references. And out of that, and out of the number that I just spotted in chapter 1, I have made my primary reason why I will read this book, and I'm going to give it a light reading, is that I'm going to be looking for recent developments in neuroscience, which this book is thoroughly rich with picking up on those, and finding out which ones might be relevant to fiction writers. And by golly, I'm going to have the excellent references to follow those down. And it's rather interesting to me, too, because sometimes when you're on a book that's kind of off topic to your main interest, they're going to cover what's interesting to you since it's the secondary topic. They're going to cover it quickly. And because they cover it quickly, it can be a very efficient way to catch up. In my case, most of the books that I've been reading in my field are older, going back to the early 2000s and even before that. In fact, one of my prime sources was written in the Middle Ages. So it would be nice to have some references to some recent material. And the other thing I'm going to do with this book when I give it a light reading, I'm going to be picking up on techniques that I think might be applicable to implementation in text, since story writing is my major interest. I'm not going to reject the book because it's sometimes the things that are slightly off topic can be more stimulating than things that are absolutely on topic. And this was certainly the case for me when who on earth would have known that a theologian from the medieval times would have the answer to how time-pressed writers in our times can create stories that are coherent emotionally across tiny segments of time in which to write. Who would have thought you would have gotten that out of someone in a medieval time period when the whole pace was very slow and contemplatives had massive amounts of time in which to contemplate. But it was there and fascinating. So I'm thinking this might just be the kind of book to send off some sparks in my brain, which is the kind of thing I really enjoy doing. And I did also note something which, of course, you're going to do when you're doing any kind of pre-reading of a book, which is to find out who the author is. And Carmen Simone, PhD, is the Chief Science Officer at Corporate Visions, a Silicon Valley entrepreneur and cognitive neuroscientist. And she also teaches at Stanford University. So it's interesting that that's kind of why we have this very academic reference section, plus a very strong applicability to business advertising. So it's not a direct fit from my area of interest, but I think it's going to be a little bit of fun to follow it. So I hope you enjoyed this real-time um, time-lapse photography example of pre-reading a book using the methods of Mortimer Adler to determine both, do you want to read the book? What are you going to be looking for when you read the book? What level of detail are you going to give the book? Is it going to be a complete analytical reading or a light reading? And how you go about answering that question. It's one thing to show someone a completed bib card, but another thing to actually see, well, what order do these things go down on the card? And then this will give us a little theme going here where I'll be picking up on the back of the bib card what I capture, and we'll go through why things end up only on the bib card and other things end up becoming main cards. But that will be our attention going forward. So I thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.